Hello, and thank you for joining us again at Voice of Rohingya Radio. We are a registered nonprofit coming to you from the state of Oregon in the United States of America. I would like to take some time to thank all of our listeners who allow this program to continue providing the latest news through our exclusive interviews, reports from inside the border, and reputable sources around the world. If you would like to stay up to date with our program, you can find our weekly broadcasts online at youtube.com/VOR Radio, or you can join our Facebook page to find more information on our activities. Filling in for Zach Taylor, who is attending the Myanmar Muslims Genocide Awareness Convention in Los Angeles this weekend, I am your host, Katira Dornbush. It is June 21st, 2014, and you are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. We begin today with the deteriorating conditions in Myanmar's internally displaced persons camps, where more people are dying from lack of medical aid and poor sanitation each day. Time magazine reported on the situation Tuesday in an article that called the facilities modern concentration camps. Malnutrition and waterborne illnesses in the camps, which are circumscribed by roaming armed guards, are aggravated by the eviction of aid groups and onset of monsoon rains, which have led to a surge of deaths that should easily be preventable. In a country that's still being hailed in the West for its tilt towards democracy, the ongoing blockade on critical aid to more than 100,000 displaced Rohingya around Sittwe and thousands elsewhere in Rakhine State amounts to a crime against humanity, according to human rights groups. The article illustrated how the Rohingya have been denied citizenship in Buddhist-majority Burma and have faced severe restrictions on marriage, employment, healthcare, and education, and said that Burmese authorities seem determined to starve and sicken the Rohingya out of existence. Aid is still being obstructed by the authorities in a variety of ways, and this appears to be symptomatic of the shared feeling among government officials at all levels that the Rohingya don't belong in Rakhine State, says Matthew Smith, Executive Director of Fortified Rights, a Bangkok-based group that released a February report highlighting long-standing government policies targeting the ethnic minority. The increasingly permanent segregation of the Rohingya is wholly inconsistent with the dominant narrative that democracy is sweeping the nation. The Rohingya are facing something greater than persecution. They're facing existential threats, Smith added. Despite the obvious shortcomings of the medical infrastructure in the camps, construction is now underway for a sprawling walled-off police base inside the perimeter. The World Food Program continues to provide rations of rice, chickpeas, oil, and salt, but aid workers insist they are not enough to stem the gathering problem of acute malnutrition. Indeed, several interned Rohingya told Time that they were brutally beaten by Burmese security forces in recent weeks for attempting to supplement their diet by fishing beyond the boundaries of the camps. With scant relief on the horizon, some Rohingya are still mustering everything they can to get out, selling their own food rations, scrap metal, even their own clothing to raise funds. One man said he made the journey overland to Malaysia in 1988, back when the ruling military junta had all but sealed off Burma from the world. He was caught and spent 18 months in prison in Malaysia before being deported home. Over the past year, he says 5 of his friends have made the boat trip successfully, and 3 have died en route. In related news, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs for the United Nations called conditions in Myanmar's IDP camps appalling after her visit to the country last week, saying it was the worst human suffering she has ever seen. The ASG told reporters that because of severe restrictions on their freedom of movement, both in camps and isolated villages, many Muslims can't rebuild their lives and have wholly inadequate access to basic services including health, education, water, and sanitation. One Rohingya camp the ASG visited was very isolated, had no schools, and was close to sea level, so it was impossible to build effective latrines. The people couldn't leave, and depended on assistance coming in for their basic needs, she said. It has already been 2 years. It's not humane to be locked into these desperate situations for any length of time. She said the authorities insist there must be restrictions on movement in the Muslim camps for security reasons. But the United Nations official said freedom of movement is a basic human right, and the UN has urged Myanmar's government to expand freedom of movement for Muslims, even with security considerations taken into account. She also said there are major issues in delivering aid to IDPs in Rakhine. Travel is difficult, and there is a huge amount of mistrust of UN humanitarian operations because local Buddhist communities think UN assistance is very biased in favor of the Muslims, despite the UN's best effort to deliver aid in an impartial manner, she said. She also warned that unless Myanmar authorities bring the perpetrators of the attacks in late March on UN and humanitarian organizations to justice, UN staff will continue to be at risk. The Assistant Secretary General added that the United Nations is also engaged with the government to address the issue of statelessness, the root cause of the violence, and is pressing for changes in the legal system so Rohingyas can have a path to citizenship. But she admitted that there's been no measurable progress thus far. International civil society organizations, human rights watchdogs, and advocacy groups have issued a united call for Burma's government to drop its proposed legislation that places restrictions on an individual's right to freedom of religion. An alliance of 81 organizations pressured the Burmese government to scrap the religious conversion law, saying that it is an attack on fundamental human rights. If adopted, this law would violate fundamental human rights and could lead to further violence against Muslims and other religious minorities in the country, the Alliance of 81 organizations said in a statement. This new piece of draft legislation appears to legitimize the views of those promoting hate speech and inciting violence against Muslims and other minorities, and if adopted, will further institutionalize discrimination against religious and ethnic minorities, the release continued. The religious conversion law, first published in state-run media on the 27th of May, proposes a process in which Burma's citizens would be required to obtain official permission to convert their religion. The law would also grant officials the power to determine whether someone seeking to convert was doing so of their own free will. Freedom of religion is enshrined as a human right. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. The suit of laws has been drafted under instruction of President Thein Sein and the Speaker of the lower house of Parliament. The laws were first proposed by a group called the Association for the Protection of Race and Religion, which has alleged links to the extremist nationalist Buddhist 969 movement, which has gained international notoriety for anti-Muslim slogans, calls to boycott Muslim stores, and hate speech. The draft law includes a provision granting sweeping powers to the Ministry of Religious Affairs to issue further directives following the implementation of the legislation, though it is yet unclear what this would mean if the legislation passes into law. The Alliance noted in their statement, however, that a key objective listed on the ministry's website proclaimed its dedication to the purification, perpetuation, promotion, and propagation of the Theravada Buddhist religious doctrine. Rachel Fleming, advocacy director at the Chin Human Rights Organization, claimed that the law promoted ethnic hatred. The proposed law appears to legitimize the views of extreme nationalists and those promoting hate speech, which is why it should be scrapped immediately, she said during an interview with Karen News. The broad wording of the provision about exerting undue influence or pressure on another to convert may effectively criminalize proselytizing, especially when we consider that township-level officials are given sweeping powers to make such assertions, she concluded. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for tuning into Voice of Rohingya Radio, a registered nonprofit coming to you from the state of Oregon in the USA. I am your host, Katira Dornbush. According to an article published yesterday by Associated Press, the chief minister of Myanmar's Rakhine state that has been embroiled in sectarian violence has retired, and the country's religious affairs minister has been fired. An announcement signed by President Thein Sein gave no explanation for the top-ranking officials' retirement and firing, but several sources said that one official is facing an investigation on corruption charges. His removal coincides with the arrest of 5 Buddhist monks last week after a well-known Buddhist monastery was raided in a late-night operation. Myanmar's president has pledged to create a clean government since he assumed power in 2011 and has overseen a series of cabinet reshuffles, though no reasons have been given. A month after being appointed as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Special Representative on Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar, Saeed Hamid has outlined his action plan at a special meeting in Jeddah. The OIC Secretary-General chaired the meeting, which was held on the sidelines of the 41st session of the Council of Foreign Ministers, with the OIC contact group on Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar to discuss the latest developments on the issues and the challenges these people have been facing. Saeed Hamid briefed the meeting on his vision and planned the action in dealing with the issue of Rohingya Muslims of Myanmar. Appointed by the OIC Secretary-General last month, Saeed Hamid's role as special envoy is to strengthen diplomatic efforts between the OIC and Myanmar authorities, as well as to pursue the cause at regional and international levels. This is aimed at promoting peace and restoring harmony, especially among non-Muslims and Muslims in Myanmar through comprehensive dialogues. Arkan Rohingya Union Director General Waqar Uddin also gave a presentation including the latest developments with regard to Rohingya Muslims and urged OIC member states to render more support. Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times has been bringing fresh journalistic eyes to the ground in Myanmar over the past few weeks through his annual Win a Trip contest that brought him and a young journalism student, Nicole Skanga, to conflict-ravaged areas in the country. On Tuesday, an article by Skanga in the Times tackled the question that many of us looking from the outside in can't help but wonder, what can I do to help? Her article offered insightful views on the answer. First, the report says, one important way of becoming involved in the Rohingya issue is to educate yourself, and then others by reading up on the situation in Rakhine State. You can follow the social media accounts of a number of journalists, academics, and experts stationed in Burma who focus on covering this conflict. Traveling, when possible, is one of the best avenues for increasing awareness of these ethnic tensions. First-hand exposure to the tensions in western Myanmar can be enormously helpful in understanding the roots of the discrimination taking place. Placing the Rohingya situation within the context of the developing nation of Myanmar is key to understanding the difference between humanitarian concerns of the Rohingya people and the developmental concerns affecting all people in Myanmar. The Rohingyas aren't the only people living below the poverty line. However, they are the only group denied health care on the basis of their religion. The article said that it can also be useful to harness your social networks to share comprehensive information about the oppression of Muslim Rohingya and recommended sources such as Human Rights Watch, United to End Genocide, UK Burma Campaign, and Fortify Rights, among others, providing information from the ground. Secondly, the report suggests talk to Washington. One of the greatest obstacles for the Rohingya population is Myanmar's 1982 citizenship law, which effectively renders over 1 million Rohingya stateless. The law prohibits many Rohingya Muslims from holding Burmese citizenship even though they have inhabited the region for generations. Amending the statute is the first step to attaining legal recognition for this population. The House of Representatives recently passed an important bipartisan resolution offered by Massachusetts Congressman Jim McGovern, urging the government of Burma to end the persecution of the Rohingya people. With enough support and action from constituents, the Senate may follow suit. Thirdly, Skanga writes, support the cause. A great way to directly engage in humanitarian efforts abroad is to donate time and energy to the cause. You can also donate to programs providing food and resources to displaced Rohingya Muslims, such as Action Against Hunger and World Food Program. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a weekly news program bringing you up-to-date information about the Rohingya people in Myanmar. You can catch our broadcast every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time here in the United States at youtube.com/VOR Radio, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on the program. Please join us next week when Zach will be bringing news from the Myanmar Muslims Genocide Awareness Convention in Los Angeles that he's attending today. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, this is Katir Dornbush signing out.